Alrighty, so this is a video going over the CESRP framework that we use internally to get the best results for cold email. If you don't know anything about me, hi, my name's Conrad. I've been running cold email and cold outbound and full go-to-market campaigns for basically my entire life. All right, I started out pretty young and I got into the game pretty early through go-to-market, and then I found eventually that cold email honestly is one of the best channels to double down into. And when you have to think about a strategy of how to run cold email effectively, you should think of the CESRP framework that we use internally. All right. So you might be wondering, well, what is it? So it consists of five main parts. And the first part is really the context. All right. So when you look at email fundamentally, email is cold, meaning that they don't know why you're contacting them, why they should even trust you, or is there any value in even looking at this email, right? A lot of people prioritize open rates or different types of reply rates, and all of that's great, but sometimes it's a vanity metric. So, what we found is when you look at all these other go to market channels like Google, Facebook, Twitter, any social media platform that sells ads, essentially, what do they control, right? They control the context of the situation that's applied to a specific username or a specific email. So naturally, since that's a winning formula, you want to replicate that for yourself, right? So that's the first point here, context. Finding essentially that context of information of why this email is relevant for something that maybe you're trying to sell or maybe you're trying to pitch, right? So a couple examples of this could be like what types of groups are these users in, right? Maybe they're in a Slack group, maybe they're in a Discord group, Facebook group, LinkedIn group, etc. Right? Maybe they use a specific type of tool. Maybe they're a customer of a different, say even like an outbound tool like Instantly or Smartlead or Email Bison, right? Maybe they use HubSpot. Maybe they use different types of CRM, right? So there's similarities in that context, and there's many other intent signals they can get. But this is one of our favorites to really target down, right? Is the context of that email. A lot of other cold outbounders out there like to skip this step completely, and they don't get as good results simply because they're going through a database without the context, right? They don't know whether a user is using a specific tool, whether they're in a group, whether they've engaged with a certain type of content, whether they're pre-warmed up. All these things matter before you even get to the actual copy of what you're going to write, right? Last thing is like, let's say they are subscribed to a newsletter, right? So they're constantly nurtured through this type of sequence. So in order to get this type of data, the context heavy data, it's pretty obvious at this point. You want to look into groups. You want to look at other types of lists where you can get specific types of tools, let's say like built with, right? A lot of e-commerce sites, you can interpret what type of tools they're using through built with, or you can use it through Clay, right? So once you attribute that to that lead and you get that context, now you have to start with the next step, which is the enrichment, right? So we kind of fill in the gaps with enrichment. If you don't know what enrichment is, essentially we're finding specific data points so that we can target the right people from a context group, right? Makes sense? So let's say that we're targeting B2B founders that own a startup that recently got VC funding, right? Well, maybe we also want to target people that are wanting to get a specific solution from those founder groups, right? So maybe let's say first we'll join a Slack group for cold email. And maybe first you'll scrape that Slack group, get all the emails, and then now you'll have to enrich to find which ones are actually founders of a company, which ones are VC backed, which ones use a specific type of tech stack, for example. And you can enrich many other things like website traffic, reviews, any types of hiring activities. Those are the more generic angles that you could go for, but they do definitely work, right? You could use some tools for this: Clay, Apollo, built with Crunchbase. The list goes on. There's a million tools out there. Highly recommend looking into Clay, potentially Peaker, and there's other types of tools out there as well, right? But for this, you want to typically look at, okay, what type of company is this, right? So on a domain level, you can enrich a lot of data. You can interpret it with AI. You can look at whether it's a B2B company, what type of target customers they might have, what's their value proposition, what type of customer base do they maybe have. So these are all things that you can do on a domain level through AI, web scraping, and interpretation. And you can apply that similar practice to honestly a LinkedIn profile to get the information within there as well, right? So maybe they're a coach, maybe they're another cold outbound specialist, maybe they're a type of B2B founder, right? You can get that information, enrich it, find the variables about that person so that you can really go on to step 3 here, which is segmentation, right? So essentially, let's say that we're still going for those B2B founders with a VC backing, right? But let's say we're trying to sell them cold email, right? So first thing we want to do is maybe look at other types of tools in the market that maybe they're already using, right? So let's say they're using Instantly, right? They're already familiar with cold email. Now we're enriching from that group all the founders that are within there through enrichments, things like Clay. And now we have to segment out different types of categories of leads, right? So whether they are actually VC backed or not, that could be one category that we'd segment. Another one could be like web traffic, for example, for e-commerce, right? Another one could be employee size, dictates a lot of revenue assumptions, right? Or if they use a specific tool. So you want to build really specific lists with specific context so that you get these separated lists along the way. But when you do that, you can assign a unique pain point based on the context of the situation, right? If you know that somebody's using Instantly, and let's say Instantly doesn't have the best this type of feature, well, then maybe that'd be a great pain point to target with your tool, right? Makes sense. You can pitch yourself as an alternative without even mentioning that you got that for Instantly. You just know they're already using it, or have at least engaged with it. You can do also that similar thing with LinkedIn followers, LinkedIn company followers. You can use Sales Nav for that as well. And you should create specific angles that are based on those groups, right? But you want to actually make it really, really relevant. So that's how we get to our step 4 here, right? So relevancy, match the offer to the moment, right? So we want to give always really, really relevant value props to their current challenge. So if you know they're using a specific tool, you have to go and research and find what types of pain points they're having, see where they are within their journey through segmentation. And if you can't get that type of data, you can always try to manipulate the data to AI assume it, right? If you know that this person has been in the community for a certain amount of time, or if you know that this person has been in the role a specific amount of time, they probably have different pain points along their journey, right? Maybe there's a lot more pressure in the beginning of a job than there is 6 months in because they've probably established some type of value within the company, right? So for new hires, that could be a great relevant intent signal once you already have that pain point, the context, and all the other things combined, right? So when you provide that value and you know that there is a relevant pain point, what you can do is reframe all of this. So a lot of people in outbound like to take. And what I mean by taking is they like to ask for your time. They like to ask for a meeting. But they forget the fundamental rule, which is cold outbound is cold, right? They'd have no reason to trust you. They don't know who you are. And they really don't even, I've never heard of you, right? So there's no reason for them to really interact unless you provide something where they should. And one of the best ways to do that is through value. So a value could be, hey, we created this type of report for you. Hey, we created this type of video for you. We created this type of asset for you, right? And would you like to see it? Very simple frameworks, make the rest relevant regarding to the copy. Maybe there's an audit, a teardown, a loom, a template, a lead list. There's many, many types of relevant upfront value things that you can do. One of the best frameworks that I have found for that for myself is when you look at any service or any product, It's essentially a bundle of actions, right? So when you have a bundle of actions combined and you just name it a service, let's say called outbound, or if it's a bundle of actions that's automated and that's called a product, well, now you can just start to parse these things one by one and see which type of bundle or one action matches the best to that person using AI, for example, right? So you can break down an offer into 10 different things and match it to this individual on that relevancy level based on everything else that you've enriched about them, right? And then it gets really, really personalized and really, really segmented on top of that, right? So you want to always give in an email, you want to ask for their time for you to give them something, essentially, right? This always works because people always want to receive something. They're, of course, not opposed to free value. So when you have free value to give, or you can reframe it as something as free value, then in order for them to receive it, you can justify an initial discovery call where you already hold the frame, the authority, the value, and you can continue throughout the conversation. All right. The last point of this here is the personalizations. So you got to make it about them. Don't make it a template. Don't make it too generic. You have to cut into the moment right where they are for that person specifically, not for a job role, not for a company. And you can mention some of these things, but you want to reference their life, right? In the end, all sales are person to person sales. So even at an organization, if it's a business to business, there's still typically one single decision maker, or there's a board which is still comprised of many opinions. So you have to interject and you have to find that personalization within, right? Show your homework, essentially. Have that level of context, that enrichment, that relevancy, so that you can actually just basically appear personalized right from the get go, right? So you can mention something like, so you launched this type of product, right? And you're probably experiencing this pain point. Let's say, as a head of ops, I'm guessing this is a problem on your radar right now, right? Maybe you got hired 3 months ago. So you got hired 3 months ago. This is probably a relevant pain point for you. Is this true? I just created a document for this, right? So you can personalize a lot of these things using AI as well, to make it really, really specific within their time frame, similar to how I mentioned within the relevancy matching. That's something that's worked very, very well for us, and it separates you truly from like the rest of the crowd, which is basically just scraping an Apollo lead list and spraying and praying a bulk template without any personalization, right? So think about this CSRP framework really almost as texting, right? Like how much relevancy and context there is when you're texting your friend or your family, right? There's a lot of backtracking. There's a lot of things to pull from in the back of your head so that you can create the most relevant message for that moment, regardless of what it is. So you have to approach email the same way. Okay. Now, some best practices. Of course, everybody gets a million emails, right? So they don't really respect email as a channel where you should read a ton, unless the rare exception is that it's like a new email, typically. But overall, you want to create really short, really impactful first lines, as well as really short, impactful subject lines, and keep the email basically as short as possible. Now, what does as short as possible mean? Literally less than 50 words, right? We'll do a lot of emails out there that are just, hey, first name, one sentence, and then a call to action. And those typically work the best, especially when it's paired with some type of value forward approach, like a lead magnet, right? For follow ups, that's a different conversation. There's many, many other things to show, like relevancy or competency, or different types of value that you can come up with later on, right? Let's say you're creating a report. Maybe the first one is to ask for, hey, Conrad, we have this report for you that we created for this, blah, blah, blah. right? Interested in seeing it. And then let's say they don't respond. Maybe the next follow up would be regarding the report statistics, right? And then the last one could be like tying it all together through a case study, the value of the report, right? So these are pieces from multiple campaigns that we're drawing upon, but you definitely want to have it be as short as possible, as as short as possible. That's the biggest thing. Make sure it's value packed. Be conversational. Don't be really focused on the mechanism within cold email. Be more focused on the benefit of the mechanism. A lot of people say, "Oh, you can generate me 10 leads through cold outbound," right? But they don't care about generating leads through cold outbound. They care about connecting to their target customer, right? So there's a lot of reframing to do with that, looking into how you phrase certain things more conversationally and normally rather than more business speak, corporate speak. And that allows you to break through the noise. The other thing that we do is sometimes we don't even say hi, hey, or hello. We just go straight to their first name, put a dash after it, and put the value proposition in, right? You got to be really clear with it, break the noise, essentially. That's the biggest thing with writing, on top of communicating the value. Um, of course, last point here is like always give something first, right? So when you give, you can get. It's how the universe simply works. It has to even out the yin and the yang, right? So here's just a structure example. Maybe the first thing you do is provide some context or a hook or a really relevant question, and then you provide that value prop, right? That asset, that report, that teardown, the screenshot, the video, etc. And then you want a very relevant insight. Maybe this is something in the next follow-up email, or if you want to test it out in A/B, you can put that as more of a case study thing, right? And then lastly, you want to actually just have the CTA, the ask, the call to action. So some typical things we do here is we build contact lists with those context tags. We segment them through enriching, right? So we enrich through Clay, LinkedIn, manual scraping, different types of databases. There's a million tools out there that you can use. And then you can group those leads together through those pain points, through the tech, through the size, through the web traffic, through the whatever you really enrich them by, or whatever you need. Write different ideas, write different angles, different context angles that you want to do. And the biggest thing you could do with the actual assets is this concept of delayed fulfillment, right? When you're reaching out and you're testing out assets that people might want, nobody's really forcing you to create that asset right now before you give it to them. You can really just ask if they would like this type of asset in the first place, see the resonance of the market, and then create the asset once you've already verified that demand, right? So once you have that, add those personalizations, make sure it's actually personalized to them. Of course, deliverability always matters the most. If your message is never seen, then, you know, there's no reason for them to even reply if you're in spam, right? So you got to stay out of spam first, then you can send these types of messages using the CESRP framework. Some common objections people have found, it's like, well, what if there's a million people in my niche? Or shouldn't we be more formal? It's email. And a lot of our clients think that formality is a big thing. And to an extent, it is. But it can also be very strategic, like I mentioned earlier in this video, right? Very strategic misspellings, very strategic placements of different types of words, PS lines, different types of assets like phone numbers, LinkedIn's. Of course, still follow deliverability rules, but those all matter, right? So you want to be really brief, really human. Humans make mistakes, maybe slight grammatical mistakes that discern you from the world of AI today, right? You got to break the rules sometimes from your English class in order to get the best results. So in terms of the saturation, so if you're sending a template and you don't have like 5 variables that you're trying to already put into your copy, or utilizing context into the copy somehow, well, then you're going to lose, right? You have to actually have the really specific copy based on the context, enrichment, segmentation, relevancy, and personalization. And that always wins, right? It's just like a SMS convo where you have a history. You have to essentially find that history for yourself for that lead, and then you can do it at scale. And then if we're not getting replies, it's simply like, okay, they don't like this type of value. It's not relevant to their pain point. Keep testing, right? Or maybe the context isn't strong enough. Maybe they don't care about this type of tool for what they're trying to achieve. So maybe there's a miscommunication or a misresearched opinion that you have. So you have to research a little bit more. But to recap all this, to close out this video, essentially, this is the CESRP framework at a glance. First thing, context. So identify intent, groups, tools, types of engagement, LinkedIn posts, likes, comments, things of that. Enrichment. Find who the actual people are, or find the types of companies that you're looking for through different types of enrichments out there, like Clay, like Peaker, like all these different tools out there, right? Find that company size, find that funding amount, find the tech stack, find the amount of website traffic they're getting, right? Segmentation. Based on that size, or based on the enrichments, you want to segment accordingly. Let's say pain points, let's say different types of traffic, different types of company stages, and you want to find the pain points that are relevant to them, right? So relevancy. And you actually want to map those typically using AI. So determine all the pain points with your client or with your team, find that, match those to the segmented enrichments, and then create a very specific, personalized sentence for that person using all this information, right? So hopefully this helps. This gives a lot of clarity for our frameworks and our copywriting styles. Maybe I'll create a couple future videos here of examples that we've made.